Hi everyone, Suzanne here. I hope you're all well and welcome to Sew Custom. This week I'm uploading two videos. The first, this one, is how I sewed up my mega flounce skirt and the second is how I patterned it. I shall leave the patterning video below, but if you want to see how I sewed it up, then let's get started. Starting with the fabric, I'm using this satin jacquard. It's quite a good weight to it, a nice drape and good for a project like this. This is my front skirt. I have two layers of that fabric underneath my pattern piece and just snipping notches at the bottom of my dart legs, and I have one other notch to snip, and that's just where I'm pointing to here. If you've watched the patterning video for this design, I've just moved that notch down by about 6 inches. So just popping a pin in at the point of my darts and marking that point. And then off camera, I'm just going to draw in my dart legs using those notches you see me snip and pinning. So I'm popping a pin on the horizontal at the point of the dart, and then a couple of pins through the legs, making sure that my pin goes directly through that chalk mark, out through the bottom chalk mark and back up through again. So that's my darts pinned on my front, ready to sew. So stitching here directly through that chalk line, back stitching at the start and then just pulling my threads at the end. I'll tie those off camera. So I've went ahead and done that here, and I've just pressed those darts. So that's my two front pieces, darts all sewn up. So now on to the back. I have one layer of folded fabric underneath my pattern piece here, and doing the same thing, popping a pin at the point of my dart and snipping notches at the bottom of my dart legs, pinning those darts in the same way as I did the front, and stitching directly through my chalk line, back stitching at the bottom of the legs and pulling my threads. And same as the front, I'll tie those threads off and give my darts a little bit of a press. So you can see I've done that here. So that's my back all prepped. So now on to the side seams. So I'm laying my front piece on top of my back, right sides together, and pinning along the side seam. Doing the same thing on the other side. That's my side seams pinned up and ready for stitching. And I'm stitching here at my 1 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching at the start, the whole way down the side seam and back stitching at the end. And I'll just tidy up that seam edge off camera, which you can see I've went ahead and done here. So I've done both side seams, and now I'm ready to tackle my flounce. So I have two layers of fabric underneath this pattern piece, and I'm going to repeat this cutting out process 3 more times, so I've got 8 flounce pieces. And I'm just going to join each of those pieces together at the straight edge, so just pinning that here, ready for stitching, and stitching at my 1 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching at the start and the end. And of course I do this for all 8 pieces, but I spare you guys that process. I finished my edges and given all 8 pieces, which are now joined, a nice press. And now to finish off my outer edges. So this is one of my straight edges. I'm using the rolled hem on the overlooker to do this. That's how that looks. And then the same around the outer circle. So I only show a little bit here, but of course I do it around the entire outer edge, which you can see here. So I really like this finish. It's super neat and tidy, quite quick to do. So now to pop the flounce onto the skirt. So the notch you seen me snip earlier on the front skirt, I'm just pinning the flounce, the edge of the flounce, to that notch. I'm not going to pin the flounce on here, I'm just going to place it as I'm stitching. You'll see that in a second. So back stitching at the start, and I've just speeded up this process. This takes a little bit of time, lots of tiny little adjustments the whole way around. And what I'm trying to do here is make sure that the flounce edge matches as close as I can get it to the skirt edge. If I don't match these up as accurately as I would like them to match up, the flounce will look a little bit uneven at the hem, and that's not the look I'm going for. So even though this is speeded up, I have taken my time attaching the flounce here. Trying to stick to my 1 centimeter seam allowance the whole way around, back stitching at the start and the end. So that's my flounce attached, and again off camera I've just finished off that edge on the overlocker and given it a nice press, and then I've a couple of pieces on each side of my front that I've just folded the seam allowance over, pressed and pinned, so you can see that there. And I'm ready now just to stitch those down. So back stitching at the start, sewing directly through those overlocked threads, and just when I get to maybe 1 centimeter inside the flounce edge, back stitching to stop. So that's my skirt front edges nicely pressed and top stitched down. And now I'm ready to attach my waistband. But before I attach it, I need to make myself a couple of ties. So I've just cut myself out 2 lengths of fabric, and I've given myself a little point at the end of each, and I'm just folding that fabric along its length, right sides together and pinning, and ready to stitch here at my 1 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching at the start and the end. I just need to trim off that bottom corner and turn everything right side out and give it a nice press. So you can see I've done that here. So that's my 2 tie pieces ready to be attached to my waistband. So I'm just snipping my notches here on said waistband. So I have 2 layers of fabric underneath my front waistband and 1 layer of fabric on the fold for my back. And now I'm ready to attach those ties to my waistband. So I'm just pinning one of those ties to my back piece at the left hand side, and then for my second tie I'm attaching it to one of my front pieces at the left hand side also. Again, just pinning that in place and ready to stitch. So this time I'm stitching within my seam allowance. I'm just tacking my ties onto my waistband for now. So that's the tie attached to my back, and then the second tie attached to one of my front pieces. So that's those both done. So now I need to attach my back piece to my front. So the edge that doesn't have any ties, I'm just laying those right sides together and pinning in place. Stitching here at my 1 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching at the start and the end. So that's one of my front pieces attached to my back. I've snipped that seam in the center and pressed the seam allowance to either side above and below that snip. So now to attach my other front side. So just pinning here to my back piece and stitching again at my 1 centimeter seam allowance, back stitching at the start and the end. And I've treated this seam in exactly the same way, in that I've snipped right through the center and then I've pressed my seam allowance to either side. That's just going to give me a nice crisp centre line through the waistband for me to line up my interfacing with. So now that my waistband is all attached and assembled, I'm ready to place that said interfacing. So I'm popping it just on one side of the waistband, as I say, butted up to that centre line, and then at the bottom of one side I've just pressed up my seam allowance by 1 centimetre, and then to close off the ends I've just folded my fabric so it's right sides together and popped a couple of pins in there at both ends, and ready to stitch. Back stitching at the start and the end at my 1 centimetre seam allowance. So that's how that looks, and of course I do the same on the other side. So now just to turn everything right side out, so I've got a nice crisp edge there on both sides of my waistband. So now I'm ready to attach my waistband to my skirt. So I'm just placing the 1 centimetre seam allowance that I didn't press right sides together with my skirt waist and pinning the whole way around, ready to stitch. So again, stitching here at my 1 centimetre seam allowance, back stitching at the start and the end. That's one side of my waistband all nicely attached. So I just need to press that seam allowance up towards the waistband, and then the folded edge that I had pressed, just pin that right along that seam line that I've just sewn. So I went ahead and did that off camera, and now just stitching from the outside this time, right along that seam edge, using a little bit of a longer stitch length, back stitching at the start and the end, and that's how that looks. So off camera I've just given that waistband a little bit of a press, and that is this little skirt complete. So I've got my ties at one side of my waistband. Off camera I just popped in a little button and buttonhole to the other side. You guys have seen me do that many times. That lovely little sort of scooped edge around my front pieces, that gorgeous flounce which I absolutely love, and this is how it looks on. So I love everything about this. I love the volume in the flounce, I love the shape of the top part of the skirt, that gorgeous sort of smooth curve that comes from the knee up to the hip. I really like that. I like the ties, I like the waistband. I've went ahead and just made myself a really basic little top to wear with it, and I love this entire outfit. It's super comfortable, super lightweight. I know I'm going to get a lot of wear out of this one. Love, love, love everything about this.
So I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, please do, and I shall see you guys in my next one. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye folks!